All right. Howdy, Rev students. Howdy. Howdy, 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 howdy. Who knows what that movie's from? Toy Story. Yep, Buzz Lightyear did a great job with that. No, how you guys doing? Y'all guys doing good? Who's sweaty from Gaga Ball? A couple of you guys? Back sweat. All right, awesome. Like, where are my sixth grade girl Gaga Ball players at? Where are you guys at? You guys are kind of like, you kind of scare me a little bit. I feel like you're like a biker gang, but about Gaga Ball. Like you're always like traveling in a pack and you pounce. I'm a little intimidated. That's why I don't go in there as much when I see you guys there. I'm scared of losing, but I hope you guys are doing good. We're in week 2 of our series called The Good Life, where we're going through the book of Galatians. And last week we were in chapter 1. Awesome. And this week we're in chapter 2. You guys are great. You're well on your way to being biblical scholars in your own right. And so the person who wrote this letter to the church at Galatia, does anyone remember his name? Paul. Awesome. You guys are absolutely killing it. So we are in week 2 of this journey through the book of Galatians. We're going chapter by chapter. So if you have not yet started reading along with us, I encourage you strongly to do so. We want you to read along with it. We passed out some notebooks last week. Does anyone have notebooks that they're taking notes in? Raise your hand. Awesome. You guys are awesome. I'm proud of you. You're my best friends. So we're going to be going over a lot of information today. So if you're not taking notes, might be a good time to do that. As always, a lot of times when I like to speak, I like to be vulnerable, share a little bit about myself, share, maybe a funny and or embarrassing story about myself, which I feel like you guys love that, right? Because I have a lot of funny and or embarrassing stories to share. I remember when I was growing up, I think I was in maybe early middle school, late elementary school. I can't really remember. It was a long time ago. I'm very old now. But so I remember coming home from school, and my dad was doing laundry, and he found this bracelet in the laundry. And I remember he came and he asked me, he's like, "Hey, Jeremy, do you know what this bracelet is?" And I was like, "No, I've never seen it before." And my dad just had this feeling like I was lying to him. Like maybe you've had that feeling someone's telling you something and you just know it's not true. Parents are like, "Yes, every day of my life." But that's where my dad was at this point. He's like, "I don't believe anything that you're telling me right now." I did not know what this bracelet was. I had no clue what it was. But so he's asking me about this bracelet. He's like, "Jeremy, I feel like you're lying to me. I really need you to tell me the truth." And so I say, "Dad, I've never seen this bracelet before. I don't know what it is. I don't know anything about it." And so it kind of escalates. He's like, "Hey, you're getting 5 spankings now. Tell me the truth." And you're grounded for 2 months. Tell me the truth. And it finally gets to the point where I'm just like, I'm not changing my story. This is the truth. And so I get spanked. I get grounded. My dad leaves. And my brother, I think he might have been taking a shower. My brother comes out, my identical twin brother, right? Y'all are really excited about the fact that I have an identical twin. But he comes out, and my dad asked him the same question. He said, "Hey, where'd this bracelet come from?" And my brother was like, "Oh, yeah, someone was passing them out at school the other day, and I took one." And so now my dad is like, "Oh, no." And so I remember this very vividly. My dad walks back in. My dad is 6'3", 340 pounds. He is a very large man. And my dad walks in. His face is down. He says, "Jeremy, I was wrong." He's like, I have wronged you. You said you were telling me the truth, and I had no reason not to believe you. And I thought you were lying to me, and I punished you for something you didn't do." And he turns and he hands me the belt. He's like, "I want you to spank me for every time that I spanked you." And so some of you, maybe you're thinking like, this is my chance. Like I've been waiting for this moment my whole life. I am not, because my dad is 6'3", 340 pounds. I'm like, this is a trap. I know it's a trap, and I'm not falling for it. And so I just remember telling my dad, I was like, "No, Dad, you don't have to do that. Like, it's fine. You made a mistake." And now my dad's like crying. He's like, "You're a better man than I am." He's walking off. And so I just remember that vividly, like as this moment of like, I was punished for something I didn't do. Like I was treated unjustly. I was treated unfairly. And maybe you can, kind of connect with that. Maybe there's been a point in time in your life where you've been treated unfairly, where something has happened to you that you did not deserve. And I feel like as where we're going today in Galatians chapter 2, that is kind of the theme and some of the feel of what's going on. Because we would say, last week we asked the question, if I had blank, then I'd have a good life. And I feel like for us this week, we talked about a lot of different things last week. But this week I would think we would say, hey, if life was fair, like if life was just, if only just things happened to me, if I was never treated unfairly, then I would have a good life. And that's kind of where we're going today. And so to recap a little bit for you guys, I know some of you weren't here last week. Paul has been writing this letter to this group of Christians who are being told by another group of Jewish Christians that not only do they have to follow Jesus, but for them to be real Christians or better Christians or more Christian, they also have to follow Jewish traditions. They have to eat the things that only the Jewish people eat. They have to dress the way the only Jewish people dress, and all the things that go along with that. And so they're saying, hey, you have to follow Jesus, but you also have to do these other things too. And Paul was not very happy about it. And so these Jewish Christians were called Judaizers, and they were trying to make them follow the Jewish traditions. And the reason this was a big deal is because the Apostle Peter was actually connected with this group. And so if you've been a part of church or heard us talking, we've talked about Peter before. Peter was the guy that, Jesus said, hey, follow me on the water. And Peter's like, I'm going to do it. And he takes a couple of steps. He's like, I'm doing it. And he starts sinking. He's like, oh no, help me, right? And so that's Peter. Peter cut the ear off of the guard. And so Peter lived with Jesus for 3 years, heard the teachings of Jesus. And when Jesus died and resurrected, and then 40 days later, he ascended to heaven, Peter was one of the people that he sent out to tell people about Jesus. He's one of the apostles. He has standing. He's influential. He's one of the scriptures use the word pillars of the faith. Yet, Paul, who did not follow Jesus during his time when Jesus was on earth, was also known as Saul, the Christian killer, before he became Paul. He was a Jewish zealot, which means he thought he was the best of all the Jewish people, and he would actually go around killing Christians. One of the notable ones in the book of Acts, there's this guy named Stephen, and it says that Paul was holding people's cloaks while they were throwing stones at him. And this is this Paul. So you think Paul probably shouldn't talk to Peter this way, but Paul comes up and says, hey, what you're doing is wrong, because Peter was acting one way with the Jewish Christians and then another way with the non-Jewish Christians. And it began to be what we call a theological issue. Theology means study of God. Theo means God, and logi, study of, so it's the study. Theology is the study of God, and this became an issue of how they understood God. What was God doing? And so at the end of chapter 2, Paul has begun to talk. He's already kind of wrote about his confrontation with Peter, and now he begins to tell us why what they were doing was wrong. Like, what was so wrong about it? What were they believing that was wrong? And what do they need to believe that is right? So that's where we're going to get started off in Galatians chapter 2, verse 16. It says, yet we know that a person is not justified by works of the law, but through faith in Jesus Christ. So also we have believed in Christ Jesus in order to be justified by faith and in Christ, and not by works of the law. Because by works of the law, no one will be justified. So a couple things it's saying there. First, it kind of makes this comparison. It says, hey, there's works of the law, and then there is faith in Jesus. And he's kind of comparing and contrasting. I want to talk to you a little bit about faith. I'm not sure if you ever thought about that. We are faith-based people. Almost everything we do is based off of faith. Every decision we make is based off of faith. Maybe you've never thought about this before. You got in a car and you drove here today, or you was a passenger in a car, and you have faith that that car was going to work the entire time on your way here. That's not a guarantee. Trust me, if you've ever been in a car that's broken down before and you did not make it to your destination, you would know that that is not guaranteed. You have faith that that's going to happen. You have faith that your car is going to work, that you're not going to run out of gas or whatever it is. We are faith-based people. Everything we do, we have faith or belief in an expected outcome. Even with relationships with parents or friendships or a boyfriend and girlfriend, those are faith-based relationships. We are believing that this person is going to be true and that this person is going to be honest and this person's going to be loyal and kind and that we have these faith-based expectations that is what it's going to be like. And sometimes that's not true. That's why those people are no longer our friends or things like that. We operate on a basis of faith. And when it comes to our relationship with God, that faith is in Jesus. Our faith isn't in something we do. Our faith isn't in something else. Our faith is in Jesus and who he is and what he said he did. And then it said that we are justified by faith, not by works. And so I want to define what it means by justified or the word justification for you real quick. Justification is the act of declaring or making someone righteous before God. Justification is the act of declaring or making someone righteous before God. And so what we mean by making right with God, that sets up the opposite side of that if we need to be made right with God, we are positionally not right with God. Like if you have to go make right with someone, like maybe you harm someone, maybe you need to ask for forgiveness, you are not right with that person. Because you are not right with him, that means you are the person in the wrong. And so relationally, in our relationship with God, we are the person in the wrong. And we talked about justice earlier, about wanting things to be fair. And we're right now as a society, we are a justice-based society, especially your generation, more so than others. You see things and say, hey, this isn't right. You shouldn't be doing this. You shouldn't treat this group of people this way. You see social issues like poverty and homelessness, and you feel the need to do something about it. You say, hey, this isn't fair. This isn't right. Someone should do something about it. I should do something about it. And here's the thing. All of that is good and all of that is true. But we can't just want justice and fairness for other people and not want it when it comes to ourselves as well. And what I mean by that is relationally, if we're talking about justice in our relationships with God, we are the wrongdoer. The Bible would use the word the transgressor. We are the person who's in the wrong. True justice means we face the penalty for our sin against a holy God, and we spend eternity separated from him in a very real place called hell. That is justice for us. That is what we deserve. That is fair based off of our wronging of God. And maybe for you would say like, do I really deserve that, right? Did I really do something that bad? And so Scripture is going to say that not only your bad is bad, but actually your good is bad. We'll look at Isaiah chapter 64, verse 6. We have all become like one who is unclean, and all of our righteous deeds are like a polluted garment. I want you to hear that. He didn't say, hey, you at your worst moment is pretty bad. He said, you at your very best is a polluted garment. He said it's trash, it's garbage when you're talking about in relationship to God. We all fade like a leaf, and our iniquities, like the wind, take us away. So I'm not sure how you feel. Is anyone into like courtroom shows, like lawyers? You like movies or show you like seeing what's going on? You like hearing the arguments? You like when the judge bangs the gavel, right? You like all the parts of it. There's a couple of different pieces. There's, an opening statement where you're going to set up, hey, this is what I want you to know that's going to happen. This is what I'm going to try to convince you is right or wrong. This is what's going to happen. And then they provide evidence towards that. And then as they try to convince a jury, they have a closing statement, and then the jury convenes and they decide whether they feel like this person is innocent or guilty. And based off what the jury decides, the judge then gives the punishment based off of what was decided or what it is. And so maybe you're into it. I love all of that. I love the thinking. I feel like, if I didn't do this, maybe I'd be a lawyer because I just like arguing with people and I feel like I'm pretty good at it. So I'd be like, hey, that could be me. I feel like I could win some arguments. But here is the scene that I'm trying to set up for you. Like, there is a reality that there is a real courtroom-like scene for your life, and you are on trial. You are standing there, and you have been declared guilty. And there's not any evidence that you can bring. There's not a witness that you can call that can change that. You have been declared guilty. And the punishment that the judge has set out based off of your crimes, based off of what you have done, is eternal separation from God. That is the reality facing all of us. And that is what Paul is kind of setting up here when he's talking about, hey, justification, us being made right, us being justified, us being declared innocent or not guilty. He says it's not done by works. It's not done by anything that me or you do. It's done by Jesus. It uses the terminology works of the law. The best way I could describe that to you is these are the things that God has asked people to do to set them apart from other people. These are the commands. The 10 Commandments would be part of the laws of God, and there's a lot of laws of God. And the belief up until Jesus came, the Jewish belief was that their obedience to these laws would merit them favor with God and allow them to be a part of God's kingdom. And so they would try to, do more good. And they would try, and they actually had to offer sacrifice every year. And there's a specific role and a specific person that would pay for their sins. And so this is where Paul gets into it a little bit more in Romans chapter 8. He says, for God has done what the law, weakened by the flesh, could not do. By sending his own son in the likeness of sinful flesh, and for sin, he condemned sin in the flesh, in order that the righteousness requirement of the law might be fulfilled in us who walk not according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. And so he's saying this law that God gave, could not save them. It was never meant to save them. He said it was actually meant to reveal what was wrong in them. The best analogy I could give you is like a diagnostic tool on your car. If you're driving around in your car and something's wrong with it, a little light pops up. If something's wrong with your engine, a check engine light comes on. If you're low on oil, an oil light might come on. Now, for me, if you were me as a early broke young college student, you might have had a lot of lights on in your car. My car was held together by duct tape, and I don't say that figuratively or geographically. I say that literally because I had turquoise duct tape holding together my passenger side mirror to the body of my car. It had a 1996 Nissan Sentra. It was not a great car. It had a lot of issues. I remember my car had a lot of rust issues, and so my brake line was actually rusted, so there would be times where I'd press on my brakes and it'd shoot out brake fluid like it's a water pistol. Not a great thing if you're trying to brake your car. The exhaust also got rusted, so the things that's supposed to take all of the exhaust and all of the fumes from the front of your car and your engine to the back of your car and send it out actually just rusted apart right in front of me. So I'm sitting in my 1996 Nissan Sentra just driving around like I'm trying to street race people because it's so obnoxiously loud. And so many I remember water had gotten in my door panel, so whenever I lowered and raised my window, every once in a while a little smoke would come up. And so basically what I'm telling you is you have a lot to look forward to as a young broke college student one day. But that was my car. I had a lot of diagnostic tools telling me there was a lot of stuff wrong with my car, but none of those were meant to fix it. I had to take it to someone who had the ability and the power to fix it. And in the same way, the law was given to us to show us where we were wrong and that we needed someone who knew what was right to fix it. And he says that the law was given to us so that as we were unkind and unloving to people, that alarms would start going off and saying, hey, that's not right. You need to get something fixed. That as we began to walk in ways that God has asked us not to, that alarms would start going off and say, hey, this is not right. You need to go get that fixed. It was never meant to fix it. And listen, in the courtroom scene of our life, a lot of times we're standing on trial, we've been declared guilty, and we start trying to put the things that we do as the evidence of why we need to be innocent, of why we're not guilty. Whether it's our church attendance, maybe you're in this room today because somehow you think you being in this room has earned you something from God. Maybe the reason that you read your Bible isn't because you're trying to learn it, but you're afraid that if you don't, you've done something bad, and therefore you will be punished for it. We oftentimes get into this good, bad, this earn mentality with it. And listen, the only way that we don't get the justice that we deserve is if someone else steps in and takes our place. And that's what Paul had just said in Romans chapter 8. He says, God, sending his own son in the likeness of flesh, condemned the flesh so that he could fulfill the righteous requirement of the law. And so what I'm telling you is in this courtroom scene that I've been trying to paint the picture, you've been declared guilty. The gavel has been banged. You are being carried off. And Jesus steps into the courtroom and says, hey, I am innocent, but I'll take his place. I'll take the punishment that he deserves. I'll take the punishment that she deserves so that they can be made right, so that justice have to be served. It's not just to forgive and forget. Justice had to be served. And Jesus standing on that cross, hanging there, took the justice that you deserved. The best way I could tell it to you, students, is Jesus took what we deserved so that we could receive what we did not deserve. Jesus took what we deserved so that we could receive what we did not. When we deserved eternal separation from God, Jesus stepped in and we received eternal community with God. We get to spend forever with him. Theologians call this the great exchange. They say, hey, on one side you have all of the wrong that you've done and all of your sin and all of your mistakes and all of your junk. He said, on the other side is Jesus and his perfect life that he lived in his holiness. And he said, on the cross, there is an exchange. And Jesus took all of your junk and he gave you all of his righteousness so that when God sees you, he sees you as a perfect son, as a perfect daughter. And that is what Paul is trying to communicate. The reason it was such a big deal that these people were trying to add things to try and get to Jesus, that you wanted Jesus, but you also needed to be more Jewish. You also needed to follow these laws. You also needed to do these things. The reason that was such a big problem is because there is nothing that they could do that could earn it. In that courtroom, none of their Jewishness could stack up and declare them innocent. Only Jesus could. I told you that it starts off as a theological issue, how we view God, but then it gets very practical. Galatians chapter 2, 17 through 19. He says, but if in our endeavor to be justified in Christ, we too were found to be sinners, is Christ then a servant of sin? Certainly not. For if I rebuild what I tore down, I prove myself to be a transgressor, for through the law, I died to the law, so that I might live to God. So Paul here is asking the question, what's the thing that makes us right with God? And he's saying it's Jesus. It's what Jesus has done. But the thing is we can get caught up in thinking that what we do earns us something from God. And it works that way in our lives. Maybe for you, you study in school and you make good grades. And because you study, you earn good grades. Maybe some of you have started working a job, and if you work hard, you get a raise and you get paid. A lot of our life works on what we do. We get something as a result. We earn something. And what Paul is arguing here is he says, if we get caught up in that mentality and we start trying to earn something from God, if we start trying to lay our good works, lay our obedience, lay our church attendance, whatever you think it is that you think makes God happy and somehow earns you something from him, if we put that down, that we're actually tearing down what we've built. That when we've said, hey, we're going to follow Jesus and we're trusting that Jesus has done it all, and then we try to add stuff on top of it. He said, you just tore down everything that you built up. This is how Paul ends it in verse 20 and 21, and this ends chapter 2. He says, I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. In the life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. I do not nullify the grace of God, for if righteousness were through the law, then Christ died for no purpose. He talks a lot about what our life is. And for us, as we're talking about what the good life is, the life that God has called us to, that Jesus died for us to have, he describes a little bit of what that looks like. He says the good life has Christ in me. He says the good life is faith that he loves me and that he gave himself for me. And listen, if you believe that is true, and then you try to add more to it and try to earn something from him, and maybe you feel like you're standing in that courtroom and you feel like you know that Jesus did all that he said he did, but you still feel guilty. You still feel shame because of something that you've done. Maybe it's something that you're still doing. Maybe you fall in the trap of saying, well, now I have to do more. Now I have to make up for what I've done. Now I have to earn something from him to get back in his good graces, to make him happy with me. And what Paul says is if you live your life like that, then Christ's death was for no purpose. He says, you're saying Jesus died for nothing if you have to add something to it. I'm not sure, probably a lot of our middle schooler students haven't seen this, but maybe some of our high school students have. There's the movie Saving Private Ryan. Maybe anyone's seen it. It's a pretty good movie. It's very graphic. It's about World War II, so there's a lot of violence, and so, like I said, not a bad thing if you haven't watched it, but maybe some of you have. I wanted to describe a scene for you at the end. I'm going to try not to ruin the movie, because hopefully one day you'll get a little bit older and you'll watch it, because it is a really great movie. But the whole movie is based off of this one guy's family. It was 5 or 6 brothers all serving in World War II, and all of them end up dying except for one. And so as they're sending letters to the family, letting them know that their son or their husband have passed away, they're writing, hey, this person, and hey, this person has the same last name, and this person has the same last name. And they put this group of people together, and they realize that everyone except for one son hasn't died. And so they felt like they needed to do something about it. So they sent a group of people through this crazy journey to find this guy, and they finally find him, and they have to fight this big battle. And at the end of the movie, you see Tom Hanks, who's one of the main characters, sitting there looking at the person they've been fighting for, doing all of this for. And after all of their sacrifice and after all of their stuff, he says, earn this. And it's this big, powerful moment that people died just to get this person back home, that people sacrificed just to get this person back home, and that he should live his life to earn it. And the movie ends and it goes to him as an old man standing at the grave, and he's bawling and he's asking the question, did I earn it? Like, did I do enough? Can I tell you something, students? That is not a weight that Jesus asked you to carry, to earn what he did for you. He did not stand on the cross saying, earn what I've done for you. That's not something that you can carry. When Jesus died on that cross, he said, it is finished. I've done everything for you. There's nothing left for you to do. You see, students, sometimes we get caught up trying to do things to earn his love and earn his grace and earn all that he's done for us, when all he's asked us to do is live in response. He says, I have loved you. I have sent my son. All of those things are true. And we respond to that in love, not to get something, but because that is true for us. But if we get that wrong, we can find ourselves trying to earn something that we were never meant to. You see, students, the good life frees us from earning what God has freely given. Our salvation, free to us, costly to God. It cost him his only son. But he has not asked us to do anything to earn it. We can't lay anything on the table. And in the courtroom scene of our life, students, I'm not sure where you're at. Maybe today you stand guilty and you are not following Jesus, and he has not stepped into your courtroom and said, I'll take that. He's mine. And maybe for you, that's your moment today. Maybe for you, that is true for you. But you still feel guilty and condemned and in shame. And Jesus says, no, I took your place. When God looks at you, he sees my holiness, my righteousness. He sees a son. He sees a daughter. Listen, students, if you are following Jesus, you have been declared not guilty. And you don't have to do anything to earn it. But if that's true for you, you should live in response to it. Pray with me.